Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I'm your host. Delighted to be here as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Mark the date, the Proton Calendar Beta is here. So we are big fans at the Ask Noah show of Proton Mail and the company that behind it. We have had Dr. Andy Yen on the program to talk about what his company is doing, and today marks the date where Proton Calendar Beta has finally arrived. So a calendar is more than just a tool. As they write on their site, it's a record of the moments that make up your life, your big meetings, your gatherings with friends, and children's birthdays. For the longest time, to easily organize these events, you had to let large corporations monitor these special events. These companies snoop on your calendar and use that information to inform their advertising. Proton Calendar is the first fully encrypted calendar app. You can use it to keep track of your plans, appointments, while keeping your data private. If you're a Proton Mail or Proton VPN user with a paid plan, you can start using Proton Calendar Beta right now. Simply log into Proton Mail account, use your Proton Mail version 4.0 beta, and you'll be able to see Proton Calendar on the sidebar. Now, we'll continue with this in just a moment, but I want to stop here and just point out that Proton Mail, and the company behind it, is doing a fantastic job in that they offer a little bit of extra nuggets for people like myself and maybe you who can afford to pay for one of their paid tiers. If you're one of the people that have a little extra cash and you want to spend that money on securing your privacy, then you're welcome to do so with Proton Mail. And as part of that, they're going to give you access to early features. So when Proton VPN comes out, that gets added as something that you just get access to. And now that Proton Calendar is launching, that's something you just get access to. And I have no reason to say this, I don't have any inside knowledge, anything like that, but if I was a betting man, I would say before 2020 is out, Proton Drive is going to be a thing, and we are probably going to invite Dr. Andy Yen to come back on the program and talk about Proton Drive. What you're seeing here is nothing short of a systematic elimination of Google services and replacement by freedom-respecting alternatives. Freedom and privacy-respecting alternatives, as it were. Dr. Andy Yen has done a great job, and the article talking about Proton Calendar continues, says, our calendar stops private companies from spying on your schedule. For users with heightened security needs, Proton Calendar will prevent authoritarian regimes from seeing who you are, from seeing who you're meeting with, and what you're doing. It does this by keeping the details of your events encrypted while they are stored on our servers. Even in the unlikely event of a breach, your agenda will remain secure. And this is something I have encouraged all of you. I probably sound like a broken record. I encourage all of you to pay attention to this. When you are signing up for online services, not only do you need to read the privacy policy, but you also need to think about how encryption keys are stored. Just because Google tells you that Gmail is encrypted or that their calendar is encrypted, just because WhatsApp tells you that they're using encryption, just because Telegram, I'm a huge proponent of Telegram. I live on Telegram. And Telegram advertises to its users that it's encrypted. And in fact, it is. There's an encrypted connection from your Telegram client to the Telegram server. But you need to stop and ask the question, who has access to those keys? Because the truth of the matter is, Telegram themselves have access to the private keys that allow you to send and receive encrypted data to and from the server. Now, that's not necessarily true with secret chats or private chats, but Telegram is being marketed as a wholesale encrypted app, and the truth is it's not end-to-end encrypted, and you want to see that term, end-to-end encrypted. If you don't see that, then there's a problem. And when you're investigating services that you might want to sign up for, when you're investigating services that you want to do business with, particularly those that you want to spend money with, I highly encourage you to read their privacy policies, understand what you're signing up for, and then look at how they deliver on their promises. One of the things that I respect about Proton Mail, and one of the reasons that I trust them, is if you go to our show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com, click on episode 161, you will see we have linked to Proton Mail security model. And they outline at a very high level, this is exactly the steps that we're taking to ensure that your data is private. Now, I want to be clear about something else too. This is something that I see come into the show either via Telegram in our Telegram group, which if you're not a part of the Geek Lab, you have to be. It's the cool place for all the techs and the geeks to hang out. You can visit it over at telegram.asknoahshow.com. Join the free chat there, discuss, learn, and share. One of the things that I see has come up in the Telegram group before, and I've seen it come in over feedback, is this idea that managing encryption can be difficult, and what's the easiest way to deal with, encrypted email, for example, or in this case, encrypted calendaring. And the truth is, if there isn't some sort of barrier to entry, if you don't notice a little bit of friction, then it's probably not working correctly. The reason that AOL Instant Messenger and MSN Messenger and Facebook Messenger, and the reason that when iMessage and all of those companies have the ability to sync your messages no matter what device you're using, and it just, boom, all of your history just appears there. The reason that's possible is because those messages are not encrypted at rest. The company has access to those messages, and they may or may not share the private key with anybody else. But if they have access to the private key in order for the servers to do that message synchronization, then you have a problem because that company has access to your private keys. The art of managing keys and the requirement to manage your own private keys and make sure that they are downloaded and safe and backed up, because if you lose them, you don't have access to your data. If that burden isn't there and you don't feel that burden at some point, then chances are you're doing it wrong. And there are a number of different companies, and we've talked about them in the past. Open Whisper Systems has done this with Signal, a very creative mechanism to allow you to maintain and deal and manage with those keys yourself, but also provide a system in which that you can sign into a new device and all of your private encrypted messages are still readable by you, the authentic user, but not readable by somebody else. This doesn't require, at least in the case of Open Whisper Systems, for you to trust a third party. You're able to do this just on your own, just by using the technology that they've implemented. And it's why Signal comes with such a strong recommendation from myself, from Edward Snowden, from Kevin Mitnick. Anybody that works in IT security or has paid attention, even a modicum of attention, to user and data privacy would recommend that you use Signal. And this is why. I also recommend you use Proton Mail, and certainly now that Proton Calendar is a thing, I absolutely recommend that people start using Proton Calendar. Now, I have set up a Nextcloud instance and have used that in the past to host my calendaring. I wasn't blown away by it. It's okay. It works. If you're going to maintain it for another reason, like you had an organization, I can kind of see that. If you just like maintaining an own cloud instance because you like playing system administrator at your house, more power to you. I come at it with a slightly different angle, and my angle is this. When I get done maintaining people's email systems and calendaring systems and troubleshooting user accounts and resetting passwords and all of the jazz that I do in my day-to-day work, the last thing I feel like doing when I come home at 6 o'clock at night is maintaining my family's accounts and resetting passwords and setting up sharing things and troubleshooting this, that, or the other and doing server updates and all that, right? I just don't want to do it anymore. I just got done doing that for 12 hours. I'm sick of it. And so what I have found is that there's a real need for people who work in IT to have some service that they can depend on that would implement services and or features the same way I would implement them if I were setting this up from scratch on my own, but I want them to do it in a freedom and privacy respecting way. These are the kind of things I really appreciate about services and products like Proton Mail, Proton Calendar. I feel very confident when I log into the Proton Mail web UI and being able to actually manage my own private keys, and I've done it, right? I've logged into Proton Mail, I've deleted my private keys, I've gone back to my inbox, and all of a sudden, all of my email is unreadable. And that's exactly what I would expect to happen. If I lose access to the private keys for any reason, I lose access to the data. Therefore, I have my private keys backed up in a very secure location, and I'm able to restore. But Proton Mail is doing it right. Quote, "We believe that everybody has the right to plan dinner with friends without announcing to Google who will attend. For that reason, once Proton Calendar is publicly released, a basic version will be available to all Proton Mail users, including the free users, while paid Proton users will benefit from additional functionality." Again, this is Proton Mail saying, hey, we don't only care about people's privacy if you're writing us a paycheck. We're going to provide a top-tier service to do it the right way for the people that are willing and able to pay for it. However, if you're not that kind of person, if you can't afford to pay for all of the whiz-bang features, we are going to give you a limited version, but it's still going to be enough to protect your privacy, to protect your identity online. It's just not going to contain the latest and greatest. And so as new features roll out, they're announced to users like me who pay for the service first. And then after I've had a chance to test it and give my feedback and promote the future development of the product, then it's released to everybody. Because at their core, they have a fundamental belief in privacy. And, privacy dates back to the right to privacy, dates back to discussions in the 1800s even, about how important privacy is to individuals. And it's why it's one of the things that is considered a universal human right. And again, if this isn't for you, if Proton Calendar for whatever reason isn't for you, if you say, I don't really care who sees this stuff, that doesn't really matter, who cares if somebody looks at what I'm doing on the internet, I would invite you to consider the ramifications of what that metadata means. We treat metadata separately from regular data as if it's less of a privacy infringement for somebody to know who you're meeting with or when or what times of the day you're tied up. And I can't remember the name. I think the name of the book is The Art of Invisibility. But the book does a very good job at describing the reasons why you should care about privacy. Plenty of books out there, including the ones by Edward Snowden, talk about what has happened and how privacy is being violated. The Art of Invisibility is one of the few books I've ever read that really dig into the reason as to why we need to care about privacy, even if you don't have anything to hide. So, and again, I think that self-hosting is a great option if that's the way you want to go. I just personally consider it a major pain. And so when, my calendar goes down and all of a sudden I don't know what meeting I'm supposed to be at or what place of town I'm supposed to be at or what time I'm supposed to be where, that's a major problem, especially if you run a business. And I can't take that risk. I don't want to take that risk. And frankly, I don't have any particular desire to maintain a calendaring system. And so I'm very, very, very happy to see that Proton Calendar now exists. I highly invite you to check it out. You can learn more by going to protonmail.com. Again, you can sign up for a free account. And in the near future, you'll have access to Proton Calendar as well. If you want access immediately, then you're going to have to sign up for their paid service. And I want to say pricing starts fairly inexpensively. It looks like their lowest tier is €4 a month. So check that out. Again, protonmail.com, Proton Calendar, the encrypted calendar solution. Phone lines are open as always, 855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Your emails, live@asknoahshow.com. We'll take them, read them on the air. Firefox 72 has been released. You can read more at mozilla.org. We'll have links in the show notes. Firefox 72, one of the newest features that has been honed is their enhanced tracking protection. Now, if you're looking, again, for data privacy, data security, and trying to eliminate your data online and prevent companies from using it to profit, Firefox is the browser you want to be using, and they have all sorts of clever protection built in, including social media trackers, cross-site tracking cookies, and crypto miners. They also block fingerprinting scripts by default for all users, taking a new bold step in the fight for users' privacy. I was reading a little bit about how some of these cross-site tracking systems work, and it's very interesting. It essentially generates a pop-up with a single pixel, and that single pixel is essentially an image, and that image then is tied to a tracking site. And so what happens is it tracks the IP address of which users rendered that pixel. And so the pixel is basically indistinguishable to any person, but there is a third-party service that's able to say, oh, this person visited this site at this particular time. And again, they're extracting that information without your knowledge. And so Firefox is doing their part to try to prevent these kinds of things. It actually goes even further than just the pixel thing, because what they're doing is trying to build a profile based on what your browser activity looks like. And so things like the settings you have in Firefox, the screen that you use, the resolution you use, the fonts that you have installed, even your choice of a web browser, all of those things can be used to kind of paint a picture of a user. And then tracking that user around the internet, eventually that user logs into a Facebook account or a Google account, and now we can correlate that user's fingerprint, that anonymous user's fingerprint, with a given identity. And so the more unique add-ons, the more fonts, the more settings you have, the easier you are to find. And companies can use this unique information to create what they're calling a fingerprint. And Firefox's view is that fingerprinting is bad for the web. The practice of fingerprinting allows you to be tracked for months, even after you clear your browser storage, even if you're using private browsing modes. It's a clear intention that it's a clear indication that you did not want to be tracked, and despite you sending that message very clearly and concisely by using a private tab, these companies continue to do just that. They continue to track your web movements. And obviously, we've talked at length about using VPNs and using Tor and these kinds of things to try and get around it. But the reality is, for a lot of people, it's just not practical. It's not practical to every time they want to browse the internet to sign up and pay for a VPN service and deal with the slightly bottleneck connection. It's not possible for people to spin up Tor inside of a business meeting because they want to Google something or DuckDuckGo something. We have to have reasonable controls in place in modern browsers, and this is what Firefox is trying to do. Because despite a near complete agreement between the standard body and browser vendors that fingerprinting is harmful, its use on the web is increasing over the past decade. And so Firefox is trying to do something about that, and so they have a whole new list of features for their enhanced tracking protection. That's essentially the little blue shield that you're now seeing in Firefox. It's doing all of this stuff behind the curtains, behind the scenes, nothing you necessarily have to pay attention to or notice. But if you actually dig into it, you can click on that little blue shield and you'll be able to see what exactly it is Firefox is doing, and you can make exemptions, because as you might imagine, anytime you go through and start stripping out certain functionality out of sites in an effort to protect privacy, sometimes you can strip away some necessary functionality of that site, and so a site won't load properly or look quite polished enough, and so they include that little blue shield to change that. The other thing that Firefox has done that I am really happy about, Firefox has replaced that annoying notification thing. If you've used Firefox at all in the last year, unless you're living under a rock, every couple sites you visit, it says, "Would you like to allow the site to send you notifications?" And the first couple times, I didn't really mind. It was fine. I thought, all right, we'll give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Sure, send me some notifications. Who cares? Well, how bad could it be in my browser? And then this annoying little window pops up, and it starts sending me updates from news sites that I have no interest in whatsoever. I visited it, weeks ago, and even when I'm not on that site, it's still sending me notifications. It's the most infuriating thing ever. Well, they've replaced that with a more delightful experience, as Firefox put it. The pop-ups are no longer interrupt your browsing. Instead, there's a small little speech bubble that will appear in the address bar when you interact with the site. They've also introduced a picture-in-picture video. So you can now select from the little blue icon at the right edge of a video, and it'll open up a pop-up floating window that you can watch while you're continuing to work on other tabs and apps. Absolutely fantastic for multitasking, particularly people like me who choose to open up a video, have it streaming in the background so that I can continue to work but get some entertainment. Let's go to the phones, 855-450-NO. It's 1-855-450-6624. You are on the air. Good evening. You're on Ask Noah.
Good evening, good night. Hi, this is David from Berlin, Germany. If we have time at the end, remind me, please, to talk about device fingerprinting and why that coin has another side.
You bet.
But first, I have a question about, I'd say, virtualization. There will be some caveats, so if it takes up too much of time to show, just cut me off. But it might be interesting for geeks who are not extreme data hoarders, or people who are carbon conscious, or who, like me, live in Germany with electricity prices as high as here.
Okay.
So since my last call a year ago or so, I had a very rapid increase in the number of family members and thus the number of photos and videos taken. So I am planning to move away from my Synology box and build a ZFS-based NAS. And I'm currently testing out a FreeNAS with actual Raspberry Pi as a ZFS replica target. On the other hand, I am also a pfSense user for actually blocking tracking, speaking of which, ads and this VPN server. But the amount of hardware space I have in my household is limited, and also every watt used and the setup costs me about $3 a year. So virtualization comes into mind, especially because I want to have print servers, compile servers, etc. So I tried the VMs on the FreeNAS, but the VMs on FreeNAS with Beehive are fairly suboptimal, especially when it comes to PCI pass-through, something that actually Wendell from Level 1 Tax alluded to recently. So I'm either looking for a pfSense alternative based on Linux. I'm not sure if anything comes to mind.
Well, when you say a pfSense alternative, obviously OpenSense comes to mind as an open source alternative to pfSense. But I guess could we back up? Could you explain what problems you're having with pfSense?
I don't have any problems with pfSense. The virtualization. So I'm running currently. My test setup is I'm running a virtual pfSense in a FreeNAS box.
Okay.
But the PCI pass-through is really not that sophisticated as under Linux.
Gotcha. Well, let's start with this then. All right, so I agree with your choice wholeheartedly to run FreeNAS. I think that's probably the best storage system out there. And one of the frustrations, much as I like Synology for my NVR, using it as a storage system would make me a little nervous because their default is ButterFS and then their backup is X4. And while X4 is a great file system and I run it on my laptop and I've had no problems, it's not even in the same category as ZFS, right? So file system storage-wise, I agree with FreeNAS. As far as a hypervisor, and full disclosure here, I've not used FreeNAS as a hypervisor, so I can't comment on its efficacy or inefficacy. But what I can tell you is that I have had excellent luck with libvirtd. And not only have I had excellent luck with libvirtd, I've had excellent luck virtualizing pfSense inside of libvirtd. The nice thing about libvirt is you don't necessarily have to do PCI pass-through. You can create two bridges. You can create one bridge for the standard VM bridge that all of the VMs will come onto the LAN and act accordingly. And then you can take two other NICs, and there can be a bridge, a direct bridge for the WAN interface of pfSense, and the other one can be a direct bridge for the LAN interface of pfSense. Now, obviously, you can get into more advanced virtual switching and stuff like that. But if you have a Dell R420 or basically any server hardware, most of them have 4 NICs at the back. We assign one to the bridge for the VM hypervisor. We assign one for the WAN and one for the LAN, and we bring them all out. And by the time we're done with it, in about 25 minutes, you have a hypervisor that's running CentOS on the base. pfSense is virtualized as the first VM. It has 2 of those network interfaces passed through them. And at the back, we simply label them, and you get the physical output of what it would be as if you bought an enterprise-grade router and a virtual server. And so you'd be able to do all of those things. The only thing you wouldn't be able to do in that situation, you would not obviously be able to virtualize FreeNAS because FreeNAS needs direct access to the disks in order for ZFS to do its thing. If you try and virtualize FreeNAS, it screws up ZFS, and then it's not worth doing, really. So what I would tell you is,
wouldn't that be solved?
Say again.
So wouldn't that be solved by a direct pass through of the disks?
Yes, you can
do. One question, and the other question is if you. There's a bit of delay. So the difference, I'm not that deep into virtualization, but isn't there a difference between the bridging and the direct PCI through? And with the bridging, I would potentially open up security vulnerabilities on the host OS. Wouldn't the host OS be accessible to the internet if it would to host the pfSense?
The host OS wouldn't be. So the way the bridge works is this: inside the host is actually saying, okay, I have access to all 4 of these NICs, and you want one of them. I will just take one of these NICs, and the host OS doesn't have an IP address or any IP connectivity to let's say NIC 3 and 4. Let's say those are the ones we designate for pfSense. So the host operating system doesn't have an IP address. It has nothing really to do with them. It's simply just passing whatever traffic comes from the hypervisor down to those individual interfaces. And so when pfSense boots up, it's going to see those 2 interfaces, or the bridge actually, really, for those 2 interfaces, and they will talk directly to the copper of that interface. So you're not exposing the host operating system any more than you would be exposing the host operating system to network traffic of any other VM that's running in the hypervisor, right? I mean, not that I wouldn't go so far as to say that there are no exploits in libvirtd, no exploits in KVM that could possibly bite you, but none any more on pfSense than you would on any other VM that's using a bridge, right? Yeah, we're trusting the hypervisor to do its job properly. If it made you nervous and you wanted to pass through, most of the NICs that are on servers are not a single PCI device, so you should be able to use PCI pass-through to get those to be recognized by pfSense, or you can actually buy on Amazon for like $20. They have dual gigabit NIC PCI cards, so it's a single PCI card, but it actually has 2 network interfaces on it. And I'll have one for you in the show notes. But if you already have a machine, you could pass that through as PCI, and then you'd have your WAN and LAN interface on pfSense.
Yeah, I do have a quad Intel NIC, and I would recommend to anyone to buy some because they're awesome. Okay, so you want the other side of that tracking coin, or do you want some personal experience on the DSM personology? Because I actually can recommend it for some people as a storage device, but not for everyone.
Well, let's start with the other side of the tracking coin. I'd be interested in hearing that for sure.
Okay, so yeah, I do use pfSense to block tracking. But device fingerprinting is interesting technology when it comes in the retail industry to prevent fraud. So if you're a big retail company and you have a lot of customers, you tend to trust those ones more who have a proven track record that they pay their bills or whatever goods they purchase, versus fraudsters who probably would try to virtualize, etc., a new device every so often. So, yeah, that's just one argument. Why you would want to have someone with an established track record. Obviously, we don't want the monetization on your information. So, yeah, I give that to you.
Okay, fair enough. And you said you had one more thing to add?
No, that was about feedback on the disk station manager on Synology.
Oh, yeah. Well, so what's your experience been with that?
5 years, yeah. So I do agree with you on some of the things from a few shows previously. I love the UI. The apps are reasonably good. I do like that it has a virus scanner basically built in as an app or a plugin, whatever you call it. I do like the fact that they have a DEP-based sync client, although it's a bit slow. But there are some caveats. So the backups are fairly slow as well, and that probably comes down to the fact that the Soho category DSMs, the Synology boxes run non-Intel or non-x86 CPUs. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, if you are a geek and you want to run NFS, the DSM doesn't let you specify the user ID of the users you create.
Interesting.
So you're going to run into trouble.
How are you backing up the Synology?
So currently that's only local with just a USB drive.
Gotcha.
And it takes, I'm not even using the file-based one. I'm using the Synology-based one because I don't know why.
I gotcha.
And by the way, Btrfs is not the default, because I think it's only the default for the ones with the x86 hardware.
Yeah, that could be. I've the ones I have bought.
One are not.
Yeah, the ones I have bought are probably the x86 ones because they're a little beefier because I'm using them as NVRs, and the default there is definitely ButterFS. But anyway, I really appreciate the input and the feedback. And did I answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. Try.
All right.
With libvirt and KVM.
Good deal. Hey, give me a call back. Let me know how it goes. I'd appreciate it. And thanks for the call. 855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. Peter, London, you're on Ask Noah. Good evening.
Hello, Noah.
Good.
It's been a long time since I've spoken to you.
It has. How have you been, sir?
I'm fine. You remember me? I'm very flattered. It was episode 18, I think.
Yeah, I think we named the episode after you.
That's very good, yeah. I like that. I've been listening a lot to what you've been saying about IoT devices in the last few months, in lots of different places, all over YouTube and so on. And I think I've sort of come to the conclusion that you've got a very similar opinion of IoT devices to me.
Mm-hmm.
You remember the article that, or the piece of news that came out not so long ago, where they hacked an Alexa with a laser beam?
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. How sensitive do these microphones built into these devices have to be? If you're amplitude modulating a laser beam, and it can translate a mechanical movement to a thin sliver of metal inside a microphone that's probably got a very sensitive amplification circuit behind it. Mm-hmm. Why did they choose the microphone to be so damn sensitive?
I would get... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I'm asking myself this question because I'm beginning to think maybe it was either done because it was a component that was readily available, cheap to buy, and they didn't check the specs. The specs may be, the amplification specs on one of these devices must be off the charts. Because the amount of mechanical movement that you transfer to a small sliver of metal, which is a membrane, mm-hmm. that then creates a modulation in the pickup circuit, it must be amazingly small. Because you're talking about the pressure of light waves,
sure,
on a laser beam. So why would they actually use a device that's that sensitive?
Well,
an IoT device that's going to be distributed to thousands of families across the world, let alone your country.
Well, I think so. There are a couple things there, right? I think the first thing, if you're trying to build a smart device that responds to voice, obviously you need that device to be as accurate as possible. And in order to be as accurate as possible, you want to capture as much sound as humanly possible. And then once we have the sound, then we can rely on processes and algorithms to try to strip out what we want and make it more accurate. The problem is the microphone can't hear you over ambient noise. It doesn't matter how good the processing is and how good the protocols are and how good the algorithms are. We're not going to get anywhere. So I think that's part of it. But the other part is this. Apple, the Apple, as much as I don't like the Apple HomePod, I have to admit that the microphones in that thing are incredible. You can have the music cranked all the way up in an entirely different room and in a normal voice, say, do XYZ, and this thing will hear you, right? Now, Apple undoubtedly spent...
My God.
Well, Apple undoubtedly spent untold amounts of money to probably develop those microphones and get them to work that way, right? But it's only a matter of time before Amazon bites onto this and Google bites onto this and Microsoft bites onto this, and eventually we are going to put these listening devices with these insanely sensitive microphones all around us. And in the exact same way, Peter, that people carry around tracking devices in their pockets that they don't call tracking devices, they call them smartphones, we are going to start putting spying and listening devices into our house that we're not going to call spying and listening devices. We're going to call them personal digital assistants.
I can't help asking the question, no, and I'm not asking it to you so you don't have to answer it, but I'm asking myself this question. Did they do it on purpose?
Yes. I think they did. I think that I don't think that Amazon, to be fair, I don't think that there's anybody sitting in Amazon Labs or Google Labs that has any nefarious purpose that sits there and says, how can we spy on people, right? I do think that there's an incredible amount of money in engineering that goes into how can we make sure that we capture audio in the best possible way, and how can we make speech recognition more accurate, and in doing so, whether they intended to or not, inadvertently open themselves up to the point where everything that is spoken in the close vicinity to one of these devices is then turned into text, cataloged, logged, data mined, and then sent. Like, their stories just came out, I think it was just end of last year, story came out about Amazon employees sitting inside of a data center with headsets on listening to people through their Alexas. I mean, this is something that happens.
I heard that.
Yeah, so I think they did it intentionally. I don't think any of these things start out as nefarious things. I just think they turn that way when somebody realizes the potential power that they wield.
This is bordering. I mean, that kind of sensitivity is bordering on LIGO's sensitivity. Are you familiar with LIGO? Yeah? Very briefly. We use it for tracking speed here in the U.S. Right. But they're using it to detect gravitational waves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost at that kind of sensitivity, this kind of microphone that they're using in IoT devices. I mean, it's starting to frighten me now.
Sure.
It really is.
Yeah. Oh, myself as well. Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying. And I appreciate you joining us all the way from London.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And I always tune in. I always listen to everything that you've done. And I'm familiar now with the DLN network.
Yes.
Very quickly, do you want me to go over some of the security things that I've implemented in Firefox? I can just give you a quick rundown on good plugins.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. There's a canvas blocker.
Okay.
Clear URLs. Cookie auto delete. And of course, uBlock Origin.
I'm going to add to that. HTTPS everywhere and no script. Those are everything you said. I agree with. I would addend those. I would add those two onto the end as well. If you're looking for extensions to kind of keep you private on the internet, I would also add to that HTTPS everywhere and no script.
Yeah, I do have that, but I don't use no script because it tends to disable a lot of functionality on pages.
Yes.
So I tend to avoid that.
Yep.
But if you want to cut out JavaScript, you can do that in uBlock Origin anyway.
Very cool.
Noah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Really enjoyed speaking to you.
Yeah, you too, sir. Have a great night. 855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Joel, Georgia, you're on Ask Noah. Good evening.
How's it going, Noah?
Hey, pretty good.
Yeah, and Happy New Year to you, by the way.
Same, my friend.
And also, before I get into my question, how much did the headlines about CES this week made you barf? What's going on with the discussion?
Here's the thing about CES. I've always kind of taken it as with the grain of salt to begin with, because CES is one of those things where that's where all the mainstream text goes, and I'm a little bit more niche to begin with, but. And here's the thing too: the Samsung's announcement of basically their ripoff of Apple ID, that was pretty cool. I don't know if you saw the keynote.
I saw the abbreviated version, and that robot assistant was a little.
Yeah. It's if you want a ball of hair, go check out CS. The nice thing is that at least they publish a lot of the videos of the talks and stuff that are there, and then you get all these tech journalists that go and cover all of the things. So if you go on YouTube, you can actually see some of the new products, many of which will never actually make it to market. But a neat conference. Anyway, how can I help you tonight?
Yeah, so I just became a proud owner of a ThinkPad E-Series laptop. The reason why I chose the E-Series was because of it had an extra drive bay, and that's where I am currently using my Linux distributions. I'm still keeping the main drive in case, because I have some assignments that require Microsoft software.
Okay.
And And so I just want to know if you have any optimizations specifically, because this is the one with the Ryzen hardware. If you know of any optimizations in Ubuntu specifically that could make it better for both the thing. I'm not sure if the E-Series is compatible with some of the software you've mentioned in the past, but maybe some optimizations for Ryzen to make it a lot more performant, especially in some games. I do play a little bit of a few games. I've got into Injustice, Gods Among Us, and I did a little Rocket League, some stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Phoronix actually did. I'll see if I can have it. Find. Yeah, here it is. I'll put this in the show notes for you. Phoronix actually did a write up on this called "The Fastest Linux Distribution for Ryzen: A 10-Way Linux OS Comparison on Ryzen 7 and Threadripper." And essentially, they went through and installed various different Linux distributions and tried tweaking them in various different ways, and then just said, "Okay, here is kind of what we found." And then they detailed their choice. As you might imagine, there's not one distribution that, this is the distribution you should use with Ryzen. The TLDR of the article was that all Linux distributions tend to work fairly well with Ryzen because most of the drivers, if not all of the drivers, are being developed and embedded right into the kernel. And so that's why when you purchase a Ryzen graphics card, for example, you don't have to go to the Ryzen site and download separate code and compile it and do all that stuff. Even like NVIDIA, you don't have to add a PPA and download the driver. You just plug the graphics card in, boot the computer up. It's going to work right out of the box. And DOS Geek actually was the one that recommended Ryzen to me and got me switched over. So now my primary machine, my primary workstation at home is running Ryzen, and I've had zero issues with it. Zero. And that is in stark contrast to my NVIDIA card that I had, that it would do this weird thing where all the windows would kind of lock up and like all the title bars would change. And so I would go to open a window and a different window would pop up because the title bar was frozen. Just weird stuff like that. Haven't had any of that since I switched to Ryzen.
Yeah, and also I've sort of mitigated myself with the. For some reason, some Flash players still have the little bit of it's like a screen tearing effect on occasion. I notice this most often with Amazon Prime and also another site that I subscribe to. So leave for political affiliation, but DailyWire.com. That their video stuff has a little bit of that fringe element on the top. It's like I can notice it. It's like a little annoying. So I'm not sure where else I would go for that. How to fix that?
Sure. I can't speak on what your specific issue is. I will tell you that I visit a lot of those same sites, and I've had absolutely no issues whatsoever with my Ryzen system. None whatsoever. I don't know if you've seen that on your new ThinkPad.
I saw that I'm currently using Ubuntu Mate, and I even actually installed the Compton window manager type thing as well to try to get it up. It might have improved a little bit, but there might be some relatively small little sweep pattern when you put the video in full screen, and it's a little annoying. It's one of those elements.
Here's the thing. Yeah. Part of that might be the fact that, I mean, if you have the E-Series is still integrated graphics, yes?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, it's Radeon. Yeah, Radeon 8.
So I mean, there's going to be tiny little rough edges around the fact that the graphics processor just isn't as powerful as it would be if you were using, a full-on desktop system. It's usable, but just like when you play a game, there's a limit to what the settings are going to be. So I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's going to be absolutely problem-free 100% because there's limitations of the hardware. But as far as the render,
the games I've had.
Been smooth.
Yeah, but the games are like mostly flawless. But I just don't. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll have to tweak a few more settings in the browser, possibly.
Could be. I'll link that article from Phoronix on Ryzen optimizations for Linux, and you can check that out in the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com.
Really appreciate it, Noah, and hope you have a good rest of your night.
You too. Thanks for the call. I really appreciate it. 855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Back to the phones, Davin from New York. Hey, Davin, welcome into the program.
Hi, how are you? And happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
I appreciate it. I'm going to minimize the questions I have for you just because I know the show's about to end.
We got 10 minutes left.
Until the rest of the podcast.
Sure.
All right, so first question was, what are your 5 most useful commands, excluding like the basics, like ls, cat, because mine is a propus, because I feel like that's convenient for me, but I want to add a little bit to that. So what would you say are your 5 most handy commands?
My 5 most handy commands. So I tell you this right off the bat. Screen is completely underutilized by most people. If you're not familiar with Screen, it allows you to run commands in the background. You can disconnect from that session, let that command continue to run, and then resume it when you get back. So Screen is one of the ones I don't see. I see people finding all sorts of ways to get around it, and when they should just be using Screen. Other thing that I think people don't is underutilized that I think is a really great command is the double bang. Let's say you type you type a command that needed elevated privileges, and the command fails because you don't have elevated privileges, and you need to go and run that command as sudo. Well, running that command, if you just type sudo space and then 2 exclamation marks, it will it will add sudo back to the original command that you just entered. And so particularly if it's very long, it will just repeat that command with elevated privileges. Off the top of my head, those are the 2 that I see most often where I go, oh, that would have been an easier way to do that. A couple other ones that come to mind. History is a great one. If you typed a command a week ago and got something to work and couldn't quite figure out what went wrong, you can go back and you type history and go back and look and see what it was that you had entered. But other than those 3, I guess I can't think of anything that would be out of the ordinary, crazy, like, oh, that's really cool. I learned something. Netstat is another one that I use pretty much on a daily basis that I don't see a lot of other people using on a daily basis. Netstat will allow you to look at what ports the computer is listening to, which can be very useful if you're running a web server. You want to see port 80 being listened to. If you're running Plex, you want to see whatever it is, 32.4, 800 or whatever. You want to see that port open. So using Netstat is a great way to look at that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. I just had, I guess, one more. Well, this is actually a comment.
Okay.
I was listening to the Destination Linux podcast today at work. This is from last week, I believe. So you guys were talking about Proton Mail and when you forget the password.
Yes.
I had actually forgotten my password a couple weeks ago. So basically, I had used KeyPass, and I had stored my Proton VPN and Proton Mail password and username in there. I ended up losing. I forgot my password to KeyPass, so I was beyond screwed. Yeah. So I had reached out to customer service to Proton Mail. I was like, hey, I forgot my password. Is there anything I can do? And some of the questions they had asked me, because I was actually able to recover that account. I wasn't sure if that's something that you had mentioned prior in the Destination Linux podcast episode. I wasn't sure if you were saying that if you forget your password, that's it, you're screwed. I was actually able.
So the way that works is this. The password isn't actually decrypting anything. The password, well, that's not entirely true. The password is what secures your private keys. The private keys are what are actually used to decrypt the email. So what I was saying in Destination Linux was that if you lose access to the private keys for any reason, you lose access to read the mail. So, for example, if you logged into Proton Mail, you deleted the private key, then you would not be able to access your email. But in your case, the key itself was just fine. Your access to the private key was lost when you locked yourself out of when you lost your password. So what they were able to do is
I can't look at any of my previous emails.
Well, then, okay, so if you can't look at any of your previous emails, then you did cycle the key, right? So, and that's what you want to happen. And again, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier in the episode when I said, if you don't feel some rub of key management, you're not doing it right? So when you reset your password on Proton Mail, what's happening is the password that's used to secure the private key, you've lost access now to the private key because you've lost access to decrypt it. So in my case, what I would have done, I back up the private keys in Proton Mail, and by the way, you probably should too going forward, backed up those private keys so I could do a password reset on Proton Mail, and yes, it would cycle my private keys, it would generate new ones and destroy my old ones because I can't prove that I have them, but because I have them backed up on my computer in a secure location, I can re-import those private keys, and all of a sudden I would have access to those emails again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Proton Mail gives you the option to do that right inside of the control panel.
I did not know that. Oh, I'll do that going forward now.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I'll make this a yes or no question just because I know there's probably other people behind me or throughout the show. The IP addresses in Caribbean, because I'm going to the Caribbean in a couple months to visit my cousins.
Okay.
I want to do a little bit of tinkering and set up like the Pi hole. Now, I was wondering, is the IP address similar to how it would be here in the States, or is it a different layout?
Well, how do you mean different layout?
I mean, like, is it going to be like 192.168, or is, like, if I go to a different country, is the IP address is it still going to be like 192.168, or am I going to have to? It's going to be completely different, the type of numbering system, like numeric system.
Well, so IP address. IPv4 is a standard, right? So it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. The IPv4 addresses are standard. Now, as to exactly which IP scheme is being used, like I'll just, not that you asked for this, but I'll give it to you anyway. The classful subnetting is a thing of the past. Like, we don't do that anymore. If you're setting up an IP address, you probably should just start with 10, because 10, and then from that you decide where you want the slash to be. So for example, if you're doing a /24, fairly common for small home, small office, that's the 3 first octets are reserved for the network. The last octet is reserved for hosts. If you did a /16, then the last 2 octets are reserved for hosts, and so on and so forth. So when you get to the Caribbean, no matter what part of the world you're in, whatever the IP address scheme is, you can absolutely get a Pi hole and set it up with, an IP address, and it'll be exactly the same as you set it up in the States, for sure. But which private IP scheme that particular household chose to use may or may not be different, but that's not a function of them living in a different part of the world. It's a function of them typing different numbers into the router when they set it up. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, have a good day, and I hope you bought a brand new stool, and do you.
That joke is not going to make it onto this show. I'm going to shut that down hard. Let me just tell you that right now. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. 855-450-NO. It's 855-450-6624. Of course, the email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard, become a part of the program. Wayne writes in and says, "Hi, Noah. Thanks so much for an enjoyable show and all you do. I've been enjoying the segments on IP cameras at the moment. I have learned a few well-timed key points as we are in the process of planning an upgrade of 500 cameras on a network. I was listening to your last episode, June 2nd, and during my smoky commute, when you discussed an email from a listener who's chosen to use the Wise camera, but only on a public space, on what should be a private LAN. A lot of listeners might not have the knowledge about VLANing, and it might be worth mentioning that they could enable the guest Wi-Fi network option on their modems and routers for that camera to do that. This option is readily available on most domestic routers. It's easy to use and offers some limited segregation." And so, of course, what he's talking about here is if you log in, if you've seen on Linksys or TP-Link, a lot of times they'll have enable guest access, and what the guest access does is it will allow the user to send traffic to the default gateway and nowhere else on the network. And of course, that's useful if your friend wants to get on Wi-Fi. He doesn't need access to your Wise camera, for example. He just needs access to the internet, then turning on that guest access will allow that. And so what Wayne is suggesting here is that perhaps if you're interested in using a Wise camera, you could put it on a internet-only LAN that will go out to the internet. Of course, it's a fantastic suggestion, not something I had originally thought of, but it is something I have in my house for quote-unquote Internet of Things, so the kids' tablets and stuff like that. I don't want them on the real network because I can't really control them. So they're on a separate WAN connection that just goes to the internet. Fantastic suggestion. Thanks for writing in. Michael M. writes in and says, "Hi, I heard you mention VPNs and that you've done a show on them, so I just listened to your show for the first time. Thanks for helping people out. My question is this. What about NordVPN? I bought a 3-year contract a few months ago and got 3 months for free. Then it came out that they'd been hacked and hadn't let people know, but it hadn't compromised user connections. I know it's common to find login credentials for people who reuse passwords, but what about somebody who has almost 3 years left on something they've paid good money for? I wouldn't recommend them because they didn't disclose this hack in a timely manner. But is there any reason I should just take a loss on the money I already paid out? Reusing passwords is a horrible practice, and I can't fault the company for what users do, but should I jump on the ship or just get my money's worth and then change? Thanks." So here's the way I would look at that situation. I agree with you. Completely unethical for them not to tell you that they've suffered a breach and that potentially your account information is compromised. Completely agree. And if we were talking about any other service, I would tell you to jump ship. You said, if you wrote in and asked me about your email provider, I would say, screw it, you can't trust them anymore. Slightly different situation when it comes to VPNs, because consider this. The entire reason you have a VPN service to begin with is to protect your privacy, to stay anonymous. And so if I had my choice, if it wouldn't totally hose the company, I would publish my VPN username and password on every site known to man, and I would let everybody use it, because then if the FBI or whoever else comes to my doorstep and says, hey, such and such was found using this account, I would go, and how many hundreds of thousands or millions of people have that account? I have no idea who it was. If it was anything else, I might tell you to stay away. The fact that it's VPN leads me to suggest to you, finish out your 3-year contract. If you don't want to give that particular company any more money because you feel like they've wronged you, then make a change. And if you're going to make a change, I highly recommend checking out Proton. They're doing a fantastic job, and they have a VPN service. You can trust them to take your money, and if they ever did suffer a breach, not only would it probably not affect you, they definitely let you know. Hey, did you know you can find more information of the Ask Noah Show? There are so many articles we didn't get to tonight, but they're all available at podcast.asknoahshow.com. You can stay up to date on the latest by following us on Twitter at Ask Noah Show. The Ask Noah Show continue next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central, right here at asknoahshow.com. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, and check out Proton Mail.